So one thing as I go through the search demo that I just want everybody to continue to think about is that we are searching this data in place without moving the data first. So as you look at this, you'll see, a search language, you'll see some cool stuff, and you'll kind of go, yeah, I've seen search language before. But what you have not seen before is you've not seen somebody actually search the information at rest at the endpoint. So we are not storing this information. We're not indexing it. We're searching it at the endpoint. So keep that in mind as we go through this, which I think that's the coolest part about search is that we're actually not actually ingesting and indexing this information. We're searching it at the endpoint and destination. So here we go. So this is the search interface in all of its glory. So we keep things in data sets. So that's where we actually search the data. They're data sets, they're not indexes. They're data sets because, again, they're existing at the endpoint or at the destination. So in this case, we were talking about Edge, like 5 minutes ago, 10 minutes ago. And so we have some Edge logs here that we'll look at. As we search those, these Edge logs in the data set are being searched from the actual Edge nodes. We have some internal logs on this leader node here. And this little icon here is the S3 icon. So we'll be searching some data that's sitting in an S3 bucket as well. We have this glorious sample searches section here to help people like me that can't remember the searches. And we make it really convenient. You can copy them to your clipboard. So let's just do that, because why not? So real quickly, you can see very fast and responsive. Our search language is built on the Kusto search language, and the mastermind Ollie is somewhere floating around there where I can't see him, but he's there. So if you have questions about the search language as we go through this, then you're very lucky to have Ollie in the room today. So the query box, pretty self-explanatory. This is where you can actually work the magic here. So again, you can type in your data set, everything begins with the data set, and then you can pipe out commands. So we have that limit command going on, and you can see we also have the type ahead feature as well as query history. So super helpful for those of you, again, that either struggle to type like me or can't remember the searches very well. So super easy, super intuitive to use. We have a time picker, pretty self-explanatory as well. You can choose from presets. We have a custom time range as well. And we have sampling. So sampling is pretty cool. So let's say I do something crazy, like limit this to a very large number. It's going to sit here and still pretty impressive. It's returning these results pretty fast, a little over 3,000 results. If I turn on sampling, I can actually just show 1 out of every 10 here. So it'll be like 300 and something, right? For those of you that are good at math. So 387. We can see it returned those in 2.92 seconds. And one of the reasons that you want to use sampling if you're searching a large data set, you can use sampling just to kind of get a preview before you dig in and you start searching through, thousands to hundreds of thousands of events. Just set this back to default here. So we'll come back to the home section here. So again, some of these sample searches that we have here, let's just pick one. This looks good. We'll go with this one. So we're going to look for anything in the internal logs with a status of 200 and a response time greater than 2. Again, we're limiting. So you can see, once again, we return some events. You can see some charting for these events. And then we also have the actual fields broken out. And of course, you can click on these and you can drill down to a specific source in this case as well, or a status if you wanted to do that, but we already have that in ours, so we wouldn't do that. You can also interact directly with the data sets as I did earlier, so you can click on one It'll immediately launch you into a search. This is an S3 bucket. You can see we just pulled some VPC flow logs and other various things out of an S3 bucket pretty quickly. So that took about 8.29 seconds there to pull back 1,000 records from an S3 bucket. So it's pretty impressive to me. That's a pretty fast return on that. So very cool. I mentioned earlier, again, we do have the type ahead language that also helps you out. But in addition to that, we also have this little question mark over here. And if you click on this, it also gives you a breakdown. This is kind of like what we saw in Stream with the pipeline functions. You get a breakdown, and you can click on these. We were using limit. So you can kind of click here. You'll get an example of what the operator does. Pick one that's got maybe a little more detail here. So time stats, we're going to use that one here momentarily. You can see what it does. So the help is built in, so you don't need to bounce around to documents trying to get help. You just come over here, click on the question mark, and the help is right there at your fingertips.
Cory, quick question with the S3 bucket. That's I have two questions actually with it. First, is that the unparsed data?
Yes, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that question.
Okay, so second on that one, what if I am taking my data and I'm archiving it to Glacier? Are you only looking at the data that's immediately available in S3, or are you digging deep since that takes time to actually archive or actually pull it back from Glacier?
So right now it is really just S3, and it's a data source like on Edge, so you can apply parsers on it. Can be the raw data. We can also search on Edge. Depending on feedback that we get out of the field, we will prioritize other sources like Glacier, like wherever data could be. It could actually be frozen data from a Splunk index, or it could be the Splunk index by itself. We will definitely depend on your feedback on prioritizing these different sources as sources where we can really federate a search query to.
Yeah, I wanted to build on that. So given that you're leaving the data in place, I would imagine the mechanism, of how you do that search varies based on the target, where this is. So like with S3, maybe, I don't know if you're using Athena or something on the back end to actually run that query, versus, if I've got a bunch of EC2s or cloud, maybe you're using something else. I guess my question is, how does that work? What does that look like? And I guess my other question is, are there data sources where you would require something like Cribl Edge to be able to do the in-place search?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's start with Edge. If you actually have running Edge and you send a query to Edge, we literally send down a pre-processed pipeline or pre-created pipeline. So the query is translated into pipeline. We ship it over to all the Edge nodes of Fleet. They scan through the data, the source log files, run it through the pipeline, send us partial results, and we can do post-aggregation, display the stuff. If your data is laying on S3, we actually have to schedule compute resources where the S3 bucket is, right? So we spin up lambdas in that region. Right now, we will actually optimize it further down to in the future having, if we figure out you always have a particular amount of execution requirements, we bring up EC2 instances, which would be too slow to bring up to be dynamic for a query, right? But too expensive to have running all the time just in case you want to run a query. So in the future, we will run a mix of EC2 instances and lambdas. Lambdas pretty much for spillover, and EC2 for having the constant workload requirements being covered just for cost optimization. The more important part is you don't need to care about it, right? So this is where Nick said, right now this is living in the cloud. So this is actually how we execute the query. You point us to the data and we find a way to push the execution towards the source. There will be some federated queries, like for example, if we actually push down a query to a Splunk index, right, where Splunk will actually provide us the search capability, and you will actually see that at least a part of the query that can be pushed to this particular data source will appear in your Splunk search there.
So that I guess that's kind of where it is a little bit important. So since it's staying in place, those functions, whether it's a Lambda or an EC2 or a container, whatever that mechanism is that running? Is that consuming resources in my account, or are those resources in your account that is consuming the processing?
As of today, this is in our account, in our cloud account, right? And you have to establish trust and a trust relationship between cross-account roles that we are allowed to read from your S3 bucket that you provide us pretty much just the read access to, right? But the lambdas are running in our account.
Is there a roadmap to flip that model where I can have that processing in mind and just send you the data back?
It's an interesting request. We could certainly do that, right? That would require a little bit more of permissions. It would need us to pretty much access compute resources living in your account. This is not required today. But yeah, if you want the lambdas, for example, to run in your account, that's definitely something that we could do. You would, of course, have to counter the network egress, right? So the lambdas are producing some data, the filtered data, right? They found the needle in the haystack. They will still pretty much put it into the cloud environment where we run the UI, where we run post-processing, where we keep the query history and so on, right? But yeah, that could be definitely one of the models where we say you provide compute resources as well from within your account, not just as a data S3 bucket.
I would think it would flip that, right? Because now in that model, in your model, I'm paying to push the data to you so that you can process it.
Mhm.
And so I am paying the egress fee. Whereas if we leave it local and I pay for the compute and I don't pay a data transfer charge if I keep it local.
So I want to talk about the edge search function, because there have been cases where I've been like, I've got a lot of data, but I think a lot of this data is crap, and I'm not going to pay to send it to Splunk because Splunk's not cheap. This combined with Edge seems like like I said, a sharded search function that would give me the ability to search a much larger data set than economically I'd be able to do, because having someone like Splunk ingest it and index it is money. But this is just sitting on my disks, and as long as the edge nodes find that data and search it, and like I said, it's pre-sharded, so it's like that's why it's getting the performance. I mean, this seems like it opens up accessibility to a lot more data and logs and things than you might be willing to. Like, let's say I turn on debug logging for something, right? But I don't send my debug logs to Splunk, but I can still search them if Edge is running on those nodes.
And there are two different scenarios. The one is really the search scenario. You never intend to actually centralize these logs into a Splunk index, right? You keep them there, but still want to have some insight once in a time, right? The other scenario was what we went all through just pretty much exactly a year ago, right? Log4j. Let's try to find the needle. Which of these servers are actually affected, right? Which have a particular Log4j version, right? And I could now actually try to ingest all the logs from all my Apache products out there in the field and then figure out which servers are affected, or I can actually try to identify the machines that are of interest, and then say, okay, from these particular servers, now I start to ingest the logs into a centralized position to have an alerting if I actually have an exploit of log4shell or something like that, right? So the first one being, yeah, I will never centralize this data. It's a search on these boxes to discover saying, let me figure out what I actually would like to centralize before just getting everything and then figure out what I should have thrown away in the first place.
Definitely seems like search plus edge is a really good design pattern, like distributed processing, being able to leave things in place.
Yep.
Yeah, your debug use case is excellent. I had 10 to 15% of all my logs was debug. And if I could keep those in place, I mean, it gives me access to the data, gives me value, but also helps me manage my costs.
All right, real quickly, I'm just going to wrap up brief to finish our little brief tour of the search language, and let's jump in and actually look at some data on S3 and Edge, because it sounds like everybody's pretty excited to see that. So just real quickly, self-explanatory stuff here I just want to call out is we have history. You can see who ran the search they ran, the ability to create saved searches. So you can actually come in, edit a saved search. You can run it from here. You can also clone them from here. So a lot of the familiar stuff that you would expect to see in search. So let's jump into the really good stuff. Let's go back to that S3 bucket. And let's look at some raw VPC flow log data. So I'm going to this data set of Cribl Search sample to grab this data. And really quickly, we actually have a walkthrough that you didn't see because I've already signed into the product and obviously set it up. But this will help you actually set up your S3 and Edge nodes. And in this case, super easy to add an S3 bucket. So you just give it a username, description. If you can type, you can give it a description. Use your bucket. Your region. And this will walk you through. You have two options. You can use the assume role, which is a recommended option. We'll give you the trust policy that you can copy and paste, as well as a permission policy for your S3 bucket. Your other option is the use of AWS keys. In this case, you would just need to set up a permission policy on your bucket. This is good for test dev stuff. We recommend assume role for production. And you save that and you get going. I don't need to save it because it's already there. But that's how we actually got the S3 bucket attached there. Let me jump back into these raw VPC flow logs. Now we're taking a look at raw VPC flow logs sitting in the S3 bucket. And you can see what they look like. They're kind of, it's okay. It's not too painful to look at, but it could be better. So in this case, I'm actually going to parse the data. So we've actually built a parsing function into the search product, and we have a parser that's actually specifically created for VPC flow logs. I'm sure Ollie made it, right, Ollie? Did you make the parser?
It's actually using the same parser as Stream. So we're reusing a lot of functionality that we had in the Stream product before. You saw the parser function there before in the demo, right? And this is essentially creating a pipeline using the same parser function.
Which is pretty awesome. So now by running it through the same parser that is used in Stream, we actually can see what it'll look like if you actually did ingest it, but we haven't ingested it. So at this point, we're still looking at these raw VPC flow logs on an S3 bucket at rest. We've not moved this data yet, but we actually can see what it would look like if we actually chose to run it through Stream and ingest it. So again, you're getting a preview of what it'll look like, but you haven't ingested it yet. So I think that's pretty powerful right there to be able to see data in a parsed format at rest in the S3 bucket. And oh, by the way, this is also a compressed file that we're looking at as well. And that all happened in around 8 seconds. So being able to, especially like for a security analyst that's doing an investigation, to be able to jump into a window of time, look at this data at rest. We're talking about that compliance copy, right? Earlier, send everything to S3 for that compliance copy. Now I can pick a window of time that maybe the incident occurred. I can jump into that S3 bucket. I can search. I can parse it to make it easier to look at to see what it looked like. And then I can choose whether I want to ingest it or not. So Ed talked about replay. This gives you basically the ability to review what you would actually ingest before replay. So you can actually go through all these events and look at them. So I think that's a pretty amazing feature that's an industry changing feature with search. And again, that comes back to we're searching in place without moving the data. You can also do things with charting. So if I wanted to look at this same information, this same flow log information, but I actually wanted to summarize the count by action to see what was accepted and what was rejected, super easy to do. If you don't like the color teal, we might be offended if you didn't. You can change the color, but it's pretty awesome color, so we'll leave it. In this case, also, you have the ability to change the graphs. Bar graphs makes the most sense. For this one, a line would look kind of funny, but you do have that flexibility here. So now we've looked at an example of what it looks like on S3. So now let's jump over and see what the same thing looks like, or well, it's going to be a different scenario, not a PPZ flow logs. But now let's go back and see what, oh, sorry, bye goat. Thank you for your help. So now let's look at some edge metrics. So we're going to jump into the data set of Cribl edge metrics. And we're just going to look at our load on a per node basis by host. Sorry, I had something, an artifact in my search. This is why we have safe searches. I'm going to go back and actually just click on my safe search and run it, because I obviously cut and pasted something that. It's not a demo for you. Do I have something weird happen? So we're just going to do it this way. Let's go into our edge metrics data set.
I think there was just a comma missing in your max function.
I should probably ask the person that helped write the search language, huh? There we go. That looks much better. So now that I actually typed the right thing, let's just go in and limit those.
I mean, that was a nice showcase. Actually, you saw the wiggly line, right? So we don't only have autocomplete. Actually, the UI shows you where you have a syntax error, right? It was underscoring the backslash there.
Yes, that was a good point there. So I meant to hit enter and didn't, and as I called out there, it actually gave me the unexpected. So I can fix my search. So if you're like me and you hit the wrong key, then that's the trick. So this is looking at our Cribl edge node metrics, and it's basically a breakdown. So again, we have our Cribl fleet, and within the fleet we have 10 hosts here, and we're just taking a peek at the load by host. But in this case, we actually want to do a few other things with it. So I'll also want to break this out a little bit with some time stats. So again, we have the type ahead. So we're going to do time stats load 1. And we'll take advantage of autocomplete there. By host. So this actually uses a load view, a graphical load view. You can see these are all of our edge nodes, and this is the actual load on a per host basis. And again, you can come in and you can edit this graph if you wanted to, do various different versions of it, but bar graph seems to work best for this one. You can click on a series to interact with that series. You can actually remove it. So you can take one out if you wanted to. And one other thing that we can do with the edge nodes as well is you can actually look at what was happening on the edge node itself in terms of, say, like authentication. So we actually have these edge nodes open. We opened SSH up to the public on the firewall. And we're actually looking at the auth log, the authentication log for these. And we can see already there's some pretty interesting stuff in here. So I can go down and let's find something that's looks interesting. They're all pretty interesting. Let's pick one. I can see in this one an inbound user from CentOS tried to hit a specific port. Cedric. So again, this is all stuff that's being searched at the edge node, but we haven't actually ingested this information yet. And if I click on any one of these hosts, I can drill down specifically by host. If we click on this event and expand it down, we also see there's an option to open this in Edge. So if I want to investigate, actually, here's a better one. We had an admin user that was trying to log in. So we can see the file. We have the host IP. We can actually teleport to this node in Edge. But now we saw there was an attempt to log in as an admin user. We can actually jump into this Edge node. We can actually look at the processes that are running. And sorry about that, mouse from. And we can actually see the files that are open. So once again, without ingesting anything, we've actually in search noticed there was an anomaly on an edge node. We were able to search here for authentication. We found something that looked interesting, and we're able to teleport straight into the edge node and start to look through things. But again, we haven't moved any data yet. So again, searching data at rest, but we're not actually ingesting this into stream yet. But that's just a brief example of being able to search the system, the edge logs in this case for authentication anomalies in this example. But again, as people were mentioning, you can actually search all of your edge nodes. You can search the data coming in for them, whatever data is being collected, and you can look through that data without having to ingest the data and get a view of what you might or might not want to ingest into your search platform, or sorry, your other platform, your observability platform, using this search product without actually having to move that data. So again, we're searching data in place at rest, but we're not actually having to move the data to do so.
You do. We have a QA site that we're working on, curious.cribl.io. You can use this today. You can kick the tires on our sandboxes. There's no requested demo button on our website. Like, nobody wants to deal with that. You can go to sandbox.cribl.io, sign up, and get a full walkthrough experience. It's the full product. You can definitely use that. If you do want to get certified, we have our Cribl University. This falls under Cory's team as well. This has really taken off. Everybody wants to get certified in the product. You can learn more about the in the docs. We've got our own community Slack, tons of stuff on YouTube. We're always posting new stuff. And then if you want to see what kind of packs we have available, we have our packs dispensary. We have about 30 or 40 different packs that you can check out.